factors, high crime, neighbors that use drugs, transients. Those are high risk factors that we have to deal with. Let me throw in a child psychologist. That's a tantrum. So the challenge is, what are you going to do as the practitioner on the outside in order to make change? We're way out here. The people most relevant to that youth are the parents right next to the problem. And individually, there are some of the challenges. Some kids do have more antisocial behavior due to, as I mentioned, a variety of different issues. Other mental health problems can confound it, low social conformity, high risk taking, etc. Calvin, how do you break this? I was carrying too much and it dropped. Your problem is you have no common sense. I've got plenty of common sense. I just choose to ignore it. So there are certain factors. It's not a matter of these kids don't know what they're doing is wrong. And I need to say, by the way, using drugs is bad. Oh, thank you. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize stealing a car wasn't okay. It's not a matter of, loading something in there they didn't know. It's a matter of helping them understand better ways to function by changing all those other systems. I'm going to go through these 9 principles. So MST is really geared around 9 principles and an analytical process. How are we doing now? Okay. And what they've also come up with, MST has adherents that rates clinicians how well they're doing based on how well they're following these 9 principles. So the first principle is this idea of finding the fit, of understanding why a problem is occurring. And if you think back at that first example, when I said, what would you do if a kid was truant from school? What we want to understand is the fit of that child's truancy. What are all of the reasons why Johnny's not going to school? Is it because he's not getting enough sleep at night? Is it because he doesn't have the right clothing? Is it because he's getting bullied? Is it because his parents have a low value in education? Is it because he's got, he can't see the board and he's embarrassed to say that and he don't want to wear his glasses? Is it because he needs accommodations and the school is unwilling to provide it? There can be 20, 30, 40 different reasons why a problem is occurring. And what we want to do in MST is we want to look at all of those reasons. And what we would do is we would have, what we would say is, we call it a fit circle. We would put a whole circle. And we'd have, why is that happening? And we're going to just draw out visually. What are all the reasons why a behavior is occurring? And then we're going to say, out of all those behaviors, what do we actually have control of? What can we do today or tomorrow to start making a change in that? So if it's addressing things that are historical, we can't do a lot about it. We can't change past behavior. We want to identify what are the things we have control of. So that's how we utilize the fit, to really understand a problem, not just from the kid's perspective, but from all of those systems. What are the reasons from the school? What are the reasons from the family? What are the reasons from the community, etc. Secondly, we want to make sure that our interventions are positive and strength-based. We want to really focus on what works for the family already. The family says we're fighting 6 days a week. Me asking them, why are you fighting, leads to a whole lot of historical reasons and rationales why they're fighting, why they're justified, and why he's to blame for this and that and the other. If I were to ask them, what's different on that 7th day that you're not fighting, how do we help you do more of that? And they could not fight for 2 days. We've just made 100% improvement on things that they already have, building on the foundation of strengths and skills that they do have. Yes.
I'm curious about the why piece, because as you just said, it's really difficult to uncover the why a lot of times, but if the first principle is finding the fit and you have to know the why things are happening to find the fit, can't you really not know the why until you actually get fully engaged with all the systems surrounding the kid?
Oh,
how do you do that first, I guess, is my
Well,
question.
the principles aren't necessarily you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't necessarily have to do every single principle every single time, but we want to make sure that you're using these principles to better understand it. And these fits that we're doing are hypotheses, working fits. It doesn't mean that we know absolutely. And as we have evidence that we do an intervention, and I'll show that when we get to this analytical process, basically is if we actually get the changes necessary, keep going. If we're not getting the changes, let's go back to the fit and identify what's not on there that we need to. What new information, because something's not working. There's something that someone didn't say. Or we jumped on the wrong driver, and obviously it's something else. So it's not a foolproof method, but it's some way that we can constantly go back and identify, are we still on track or not? So So we always want to stay focused on the strengths of what the family already has for resiliency. So clinicians typically go in and doing strengths and weaknesses for the family, the individual, the community, the peer, the school, because we always want to look at what do they have in their corner that we can build off of. It's a lot easier to focus on what skills the family already has than focusing on deficits. It's also disempowering to families when you're talking about all the problems as compared to instilling hope and letting them know that change can happen. Look, last Sunday you didn't fight. That's great. Let's have you not fight Saturday and Sunday. What would it take? Let's come up with a plan. Let's look at the fit of what was different on Sunday that you want to fight it. We also want to increase responsibility. So it's important that when clinicians working with the family, that the interventions are designed to help the family and the youth to increase their responsibility. It's very easy for a clinician to come into a family, look at a problem like truancy, pick up the phone, call the school, arrange a meeting, go to the school meeting, advocate for the kid, etc. But if the parent doesn't learn how to do that themselves, what's going to happen as soon as that clinician is no longer with the family? Things are going to fall apart the next time something occurs. So it's vitally important that we're focused on helping youth learn and the family learn what they can do so they can do it themselves. We want to make sure that we're focused on the present, action-oriented, well-defined. So again, we don't want to deal with historical problems. We want to talk about what can be different today and tomorrow in order to make those changes. We want to define problems very specifically. What would it look like if Johnny was going to school? Okay, he went to school. Does that mean he has to stay? Well, kids, I went to school, I showed up, and I went home. All right, so we want to make sure that our problems are really well defined. That you're going to go to school, you're going to stay in school, you're not going to go to sleep, you're going to actually participate in classes. That level of specificity is important. We want to identify targeting sequences. So when we're looking at problems that occur, it's easy in families to see these patterns of behavior that we all fall back into. And changing behavior is so challenging. I was in New Zealand, as I mentioned. They drive on the other side of the road. You know, that was some pretty good feedback, seeing a car come towards me to make sure that I switched over and got on the right side of the lane. But it took me still 2 years where I was still turning on the turn signal instead of the windshield wipers, or vice versa, because those were switched. Because those behaviors are so deeply ingrained, it was hard to change. So when we're talking about targeting sequences for a family, we need to understand what are the things that lead up to these crisis points. If it's an argument, did the kid just, have an argument out of the blue, or were there certain things that occurred? And from that argument, does that then lead into a physical fight, which then leads to the police getting called? So the more that we can understand what's occurring and how these things start building momentum, we can intervene. And the sooner we can intervene, the better off we are. So a big part of what we do in MST is trying to understand why these patterns of behaviors occur. When the kid ends up stealing a car, what was happening? Well, he kept saying that he was going to go to Johnny's house and hang out, but he never made it to Johnny's house. And yet, next week, he said, I'm going to Johnny's house, and Mom said, okay. And he ended up stealing the car again. What could you, Mom, what could you do next time when he said, I'm going to go to Johnny's house, that's going to change that? Well, I could walk with him to Johnny's house. Oh, great. We're looking at that sequence of doing something fairly small that's going to make a huge change long term. We want to make sure that our interventions are developmentally appropriate, culturally appropriate. The sorts of rules that a 12 or 13-year-old is going to experience can be very different than what a 15, 16, 17-year-old is going to experience. At the same time, if you have a 16, 17-year-old that's acting like a 9-year-old, you don't have the curfew at 2 a.m. if you're still not responsible enough to come back. So we want to make sure that what we're doing helps based on the youth's behavior. We also want to make sure that's incorporated in what the family's beliefs are. Because if the family has a belief that something's okay, we want to support that as long as it's not going against the laws and the court order or whatever the problems we let that kid get in trouble to begin with. We want to make sure that, that what we're doing requires continuous effort. That we're setting up interventions that are not just done once a week. So do this and then you're done for the week. But we want to make sure that we're creating things that families are doing on an ongoing basis. Because again, for change to occur, we need to make sure that families are doing it a lot. You have a short window, 3 to 5 months, to make these long-term patterns change. So unless they're doing it on a regular basis, you're going to fall back into old patterns.